Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to Startup Grind. How many people, this is their first Startup Grind event? Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. And I'm surprised I haven't been asked this tonight, but people ask me, what is Startup Grind? And Startup Grind is an organization started in Silicon Valley, and the mission is to educate, connect, and inspire entrepreneurs. I had some of the signs up front, but it's like, make friends, not contacts. Help others before you're helping yourself. And that's kind of the philosophy. It's basically entrepreneurs helping each other out. And it's a tradition for Startup Grind. If you guys can all stand up, please, as I make it. So what I'd like to do is introduce Steve Simonetto. Simonetto.
Close. Just don't call me late for dinner.
He's the CEO and co-founder of LCS Technologies. And LCS Technologies was actually ranked under CIO's review, the CIO review, top 100 most promising Oracle service company. And they also made the number 689 on the Inc. 5000. And then, just give them a hand for the rock star that Steve is.
All right. Thanks, Rich.
So the format of our interview is, the first part is we're really just trying to get to know you as a person. So, where are you from, and what did your parents do?
So it all started in a tiny little town. Oh, no. Actually, it really did. Do any of you know where Dunsmuir, California is? Right up at the base of Mount Shasta, about 200 miles north of here. And moved to Sacramento to go to Sac State, and just kind of became home. And I love it. I've lived other places for project reloads or temporary job things, but just decided Sacramento was the place, and
we're glad to have you here.
Thanks.
So, what was your first job?
So I did a couple of them. It wasn't a trick question, but so while I was going to Sac State, I actually worked as a student assistant, COBOL programmer for Caltrans. So my state experience goes back quite a ways. And then after college, my first job was as a computer programmer analyst for Frontier Airlines in Denver.
Okay. And what is it you wanted to be when you grew up? I'm guessing fireman, but I'm not sure.
Well, at about 5 or 6, I wanted to be a fireman. My dad was a locomotive engineer, so there was a period where I wanted to do that. There was a period in high school where I decided law enforcement was what I wanted to do.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Shh, don't go there. And then actually, it's kind of crazy how I got into this business, but I took an aptitude test like late in my junior year, early in my senior year in high school, and kind of trying to figure out what are you going to be, what should you want to be when you grow up. And it came back with one of two things. One was a math teacher, and the other was a computer scientist. And keep in mind, this is like 1975. I didn't even know what a computer was. So, but I said, hey, I don't want to be a math teacher, so let's try this. So I came down to Sac State.
I think mine's a mortician or something.
Okay.
So let's, and so you founded LCS Technology, and I guess the first question is, what does LCS stand for?
Another funny one. So it's the initials of the last name of the 3 people who were going to start the business. The L, when it came time to actually move forward, so you file for incorporation, right. You start the formation process, and you have to declare a name. Well, between that time and the time that it was time to put money in the bank and buy shares, the L decided he wasn't in. So the C is for Stefan Combe, the 2 of us, and the S is for Steve Simonetto, and
so
the 2 of us.
Does the L ever regret not coming in? Or is he ever talk about that?
I don't think he does. He just had some stuff going on, and just family and stuff. And I think he was in Florida, doing some stuff in Florida, and it just didn't work. It wasn't any kind of a negative thing. It just didn't work out with timing wise.
Well, LCS actually sounds better than like CS, so.
Yes, it does.
It needs to be 3 letters. Yeah. And so I was actually going over your bio on LinkedIn, and you went from being an account manager at Oracle to starting LCS. So what sort of inspired you to make that jump?
It's kind of funny. I was talking to a couple people here. Basically, it was a couple of things. One was just getting worn out on the grind at Oracle. The other was, without going into the whole long story, Stefan and I had lunch one day, and it's kind of like, we got to do something other than this. 3 cocktail napkins later in 2005, it's like, he says to me, dude, we can do this. So we founded it in 2006, and here we are.
So I think did you? I think when we talked, you basically said you were still sort of working on the side.
Yeah.
This was a side project.
And this is a great message. So there's a lot of lawyers in the room, so just a quick caveat here. So what I'm telling you is, yeah, experience. Can this be privileged? No. So I'm sharing experience. I'm a jokester too. Don't mind me. So I'm sharing experience. I'm not necessarily giving legal or advice on what you should do. So yeah. So we're doing a startup, and the basic concept of the business is consulting, right? So we get paid for delivering services, and we're all working at Oracle or had left Oracle, and we all had deep Oracle skills. But I was the guy running the business at Oracle, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea was I would run the business at LCS. But the problem is that isn't billable work, so there's no revenue coming in. So you've got to build up the revenue stream to be able to afford the overhead. So we started it with Stefan, leading things out, and we brought on a few other people and got it built up. In the meantime, for a couple of years, I kept my day job at Oracle, which a lot of books on how to start a business tell you keep your day job and start your business as your hobby, nights, weekends. So that's how we did it. And in 2008, we'd gotten a few folks on as billable consultants, and then we landed a key project that was. It was big enough, and there was enough there to say, you know what, if we're going to do it, now's the time. So I resigned from Oracle, and we jumped in.
So what was your first client? And then how long did it take you to land that first client?
So that project we won that really kind of jump-started us and got us going in 2008 was with the Department of Justice. Right. The first clients were, I think you were billing at DOJ, Aaron was doing work at Gap. So the way we got it seated was with staff augmentation work, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay, this big project with DOJ, that was a real project. It was fixed price, and so we had decent margins in there, and we could keep the margins, or we could reinvest them and bringing me on, where it gave us about a year and a half of runway for me to try and turn it from a project into a business.
So you started in 2005?
We founded in 2006.
So 2 years before you got that big project where you were able to make that big leap.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so you sort of alluded to, what were some of the challenges you saw when you first started?
Cash flow. Is there any other startup problem? The rest is easy.
Well, I guess one of the things and we'll talk about it a little more, but you specifically work with the state government, and I know I deal with talk to a lot of startups, and they pretty much stray away from government work, and but you basically took it head on.
So again, we go back to what you know, and especially in a services business, what people are willing to pay you for, right? I went back to it was my second year in college, so let's call it 1977. I was working for the state. I know state government. At Oracle, I ran a state and local government consulting practice. So that's one side of it. It's the space we know. Another piece of it with the state is they've got huge budgets, right? There's a lot of bureaucracy to deal with, but the dollars are huge. And then the third thing is we're focused on Oracle technologies. Well, Oracle's an enterprise play. So I ask you, how many enterprises, and we'll call it Fortune 1000 companies, are headquartered and have their IT shops in Sacramento? Pretty much the state. So it just it made sense given what we were going into.
So and part of the reason one of the reasons I asked you to come here is, what type of advice would you give to startups if they wanted to do business with the government, state government?
You've got to have patience, and you can't be in a situation where you need a deal next month to survive. Okay, the sales cycles are very long. It's a very bureaucratic process. But at the same time, the trade-off for that, the reward, is projects tend to be bigger, and to the extent you can get entrenched, your odds of doing follow-on work, not in the sense that it's disallowed by the state administrative manual, but getting additional business competed with existing clients is pretty high.
Work with the state. What's the first thing they should do? What are the things they should be doing?
There's several things, and they have to run in parallel. But the first thing is, you've got to sell, just like
Right.
going into any kind of business. So whatever product or service you've got that you're pitching, you've got to get out to the various state agencies, the potential customers and prospects, and basically do selling. At the same time, to do business with the state, you've got to get on some sort of a master agreement. And that process can take 6 to 12 months just to get on, say, a CMAS, California Multiple Award Schedule. For any of you that are familiar with federal work, it's kind of the state's version of the GSA, or the General Services Administration schedule. But it's basically you get pre-qualified at maximum rates for labor categories or product categories if you're selling
So it
products.
takes about 12 months to get on the CMAS. And all right.
And then another thing in parallel, and I think you and I talked about it, and you've been through this part of it, is obviously as a startup, you're going to be a small business. You should work on getting a small business certification with the state. And I didn't bring websites, but if you got to the Department of General
Right.
Services website, click on doing business with the state, and look CMAS and small business certification.
It actually took me several tries and a couple phone calls into the where you wait on hold for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Before I was able to figure it out.
Stefan ran with that part of the process. Ask him about phone calls.
It's a project, and you have to take the lead.
And it was kind of like
Every day.
it was kind of like doing the taxes, because they were asking for tax returns and all sorts of things, all sorts of paperwork, and you kind of needed it all up front. And I remember it took me a while to get through that process.
Yeah. So again, whether you're doing it as a hobby, part-time, or whatever, you've got to have at least a year runway from when you start to get on a CMAS, but at the same time, you've got to sell. So one of the other things with the state, with doing business with the state, is that everything has to be competitively bid, right? Now, the reality is that while things are competitively bid, typically those bids are written based on selling that has been done by somebody. If not you,
Somebody else.
you're probably not going to win that bid, even though it's competitive, right? Because let's say 3 of us are in there or are going to compete on a bid, but I've been in there talking to them about what specific skills they need out of an Oracle DBA, and obviously I'm going to be pitching the skills that my guy has, right? That's probably what the bid's going to come out asking for. So I've got an inside track, and they already know that I can deliver that guy because we've been talking about it and, sharing. So when I say selling, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
So how does one sell to the, and you mentioned the Department of Justice. Are you like knocking in a door and saying, who is the director, or who are you talking to when you're selling to the state?
So it's there's no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet answer. It's just like, who do you talk to when you sell to Intel, right? So you need to talk to the business. You need to, if it's an IT related, then that's what we do. If it's an IT related service or product, you need to be talking to IT. Basically, you need to be identifying just strategic selling type stuff. Identify your stakeholders, identify your objectors, and you've just got to go through the standard selling process. Get in there and talk to the stakeholders.
So are you literally like, opening the door to whatever the building is and roaming the halls, or?
That's a little tough, especially at a DOJ, because you've got to get badged, and if you're not background checked, you need to be escorted to get in there, right? So no, now it turns out that DOJ we've been doing business with since way back in the Oracle days. I think like 1997 we started doing.
So you were already sort of there then.
Yeah, but let's say CalPERS. Let's say we want to go chase something at CalPERS, and maybe we know they are a PeopleSoft customer, and we learned from Oracle that they're 2 versions behind on their their HR system. I'm making this up, but just to give you an example. And we know that Oracle is going to stop supporting that version of the HR system in a year, right? So it's like, they've got to upgrade in order to stay supported. So let me start making some calls, sending some notes. Let me check the org chart. Let me see who in IT and or the business community. Again, this is selling 101, right? It's no different than selling to Intel or to any other large business. You're dealing with a bureaucracy of 250,000 people, of employees at the state, right? Well, I mean, I worked for Oracle for 12 years. We're talking a bureaucracy of 100,000 people. It's the same thing. It's just finding out who you need to get to, getting the door open and getting in there. That's the selling part. In parallel, you've got to have a contract vehicle, right? So that's where the CMAS or the Master Services Agreement comes in. But as we were talking, I'll use the same analogy for folks here. Being on a contract, being approved for CMAS or for the Master Services Agreement, it's like getting a ticket to the dance. You still have to go find a date. You can get into the dance, but you still have to go find a date. And that's just good, hard-nosed, old-fashioned selling.
Can you get business without being on the CMAS? Like, for me, I'm not on the CMAS. I'm just on the whatever that certification is.
Yeah. So it's more challenging. You can, and again, I'm not an expert in all the procurement avenues that the state has, but one of the things they can do is they can, for awards, I think up to $250,000, it still has to be competitively bid among, I think, but there's a small business procurement process where I think they only need 2 bids from certified small businesses, and then they can make a selection based on that. But you're going to have to educate your prospect that that's a way to do it.
Sure.
But that's through the selling process.
Sure. Okay. And then kind of going with the selling, how do you market? How do you market yourself to the state? You talk about selling, but how do you market yourself?
I'm here. We're getting out to the community, Tricia. Is that a good answer? No, it's about getting out in the community. It's about getting out to those folks. There are a number of state-related activities. Used to be called government technology would do GovTech or
so you like conferences?
Conferences, yeah. And you have to balance that because, getting to the decision makers versus having a booth at a government technology expo. I mean, the booth, a lot of the people that come to booths are non-decision makers that are just looking to get a bag full of tchotchkes. So again,
water gun.
Well, yeah, but so you just got to balance that. But it's just that part, again, is not that much different than doing business.
Is that worthwhile doing those conferences, or is it better just to sort of, make the cold calls and through the org chart or whatever?
We don't do a lot of conferences.
Okay.
I don't know that that's the wisest decision, but the best way to answer that is to tell you where we put our money.
You don't really see the ROI on it then?
So the conferences can have some value. The trade shows, I don't believe, do.
Okay. So the conferences is like when you have like the state CIO or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And they've got another one that is like a project management, like a 2-day seminar, and they're looking for sponsors, and as part of that sponsorship, you get to have lunch with and mingle with typically more senior, more decision maker folks.
Okay. And you've done some business on the commercial side, or the private side, I think is how you call it. And I think you mentioned Gap and something else.
It was a subsidiary of AT&T where we did some.
What's kind of the difference? What do you feel like the difference working, selling to the private sector and the public sector?
The pace of the sales cycle. The fact that in the private sector, typically, if folks can justify the value prop, they can cut you an order and just do it. You don't have to go through the formal bid process. They don't have to send out RFOs. I mean, it just becomes like you running your business. If you're going to sign up for QuickBooks Online, or what, you can make a decision, write a check, and you're done with it. Where with the private sector,
we got it. Told them on Thursday, and that was starting Saturday. So that was just fast.
So,
yeah.
But I guess you're just more you're kind of geared to selling to the government, so that's why you're really focused, as opposed to maybe trying to focus.
So I would say two things. One is, we know government, and so we have somewhat of a competitive advantage, certainly over folks that don't, and a lot of folks that are trying to break into government. We aren't unique in that we have a lot of government experience. So, but one, we know government and we know the processes pretty well. The other is just, a gig with the Gap might be for a couple weeks of a DBA. Typically with the state, you're looking at somebody for a year or a bigger project. So there's a return on your time investment on the year-long sales cycle. That is, you don't have to do as many deals.
Is there more of an administrative burden when you deal with the government? Like so I'm guessing you have to have like all your paperwork really squared away, or almost to hire someone that just knows how to do government contracting?
No, the actual contracting itself, part of getting on these master agreements is you establish your maximum rate structure. I mean, so within a bid, you can't go above that, you can go below. But part of what you do is in that process, you agree to the government's terms. So once you get to actually getting an order, it's just about the statement of work and agreeing to a statement of work, and pricing and agreeing to that. All the master terms, you've already agreed to that when you signed up for the master agreement.
So just once you get through that initial paperwork, then it's easy.
Then it's easy as relative.
Easier.
It's just statement of work and pricing and deliverables, if it's deliverables based versus hourly rate. And again, what we do is primarily services, so I'm going to be talking rates and deliverables. But if you've got a product you're trying to sell to the state, just kind of think that you're going to have a product list and specs, and there's going to be a per unit price in your master agreement.
And when we were talking earlier, you had mentioned that one of your advantages is how your selling process, where you have a dedicated account manager. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, and I want to use kind of two basic models, and there's as many. It's a spectrum, but so typically in services there's two options. Either you're going to have an account manager model where you're responsible for the account. If you sell them a deal, then you're ultimately responsible for delivering successfully and making sure that customer's happy. Or you can have a separated sales and delivery, to where you've got one group whose job is to sell and hit a quota, and then as soon as before the ink's dry on the paper, it's going over the wall to the delivery team, and they're off to chase the next deal. Well, then, they're just trying to get the deal closed, and it may not be practical. Anyway, we just philosophically, to our core, are account management focused. So one of our guys sells a deal, they own it, and all the issues all the way through it. Part of that is, I believe it drives higher focus on customer satisfaction. The other part of that is somewhat self-serving. So that's the positive outward side. The self-serving part of it is, if you think about it, who's easier to sell work to than an already satisfied customer with whom you have a relationship? So that's how we're organized, and it's core to who we are.
Okay, that sounds great. One of the interesting things I find about LCS is that you're essentially a virtual company, and how do you make that work?
Well, we do a number of functions. Let's back up on the virtual company. So it starts with we're a services firm, and our delivery folks are typically at client sites anyway. Right. So it becomes a little bit of a challenge as they get more dispersed, but we'll do quarterly functions where we bring everybody together, talk about how the quarter was, where the business is headed, and then do some fun things. So there's trying to do some just corporate spirit and identity there. But as far as how do we work, we don't have, for an IT company, we don't have a server. Everything we do is software as a service. Right. So our filing system is box.com. Our accounting system is QuickBooks Online. Payroll, we happen to use B of A, but they have, it turns out it's Intuit's, it's right. QuickBooks Payroll, but it's as a service. We pay them like $48 a month. Everything's hosted by them. We don't have a server anywhere.
You use your email's probably cloud-based too.
Yep.
And are you using like Basecamp for project management, or using a tool like that?
So again, we typically use whatever the customer standards are. So like we use like Jira at DOJ. We use Jira and Microsoft Project.
And they're probably using what's that? It's similar to. They probably use, I forget what it's called. It's like Basecamp. Microsoft has. It's. No, there's a. I'm sorry, but there's an in-house version.
Okay.
Microsoft has an in-house version of Basecamp.
Yeah, so
it's pretty much you use whatever the client. That makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
So at this point, where do you see LCS? Where do you see LCS going? What's your kind of end game, or the future of LCS for you?
End game is where's the end? But so no, we're focused on Oracle. We'll continue to do that. Oracle seems to be a very solid company, and the cloud is being very disruptive to. You guys read about IBM's earnings; they stunk it up. So everybody's having to react, but Oracle seems to be very stable. So we're focused on their technology stack. What we're looking to do is move along the continuum from hourly services, call it staff augmentation, to more solution, which projects, but where it's less commoditized, where we have a unique skill and ability to where you've got a little more margin pressure. And now we're also starting to look at developing our own software embodiment of intellectual property to where we can either sell it as a service or as something we license. So in terms of types of work, we're looking to move along that continuum. As far as just market itself, we're looking. We've already begun, and we're just looking to continue to grow nationally. We love the state of California. They'll always be an anchor. We're a Sacramento-based company. But to the extent we can somewhat soften the cycles of the California budget and economy, it'll make us more stable. So we're looking to do that. We're currently doing work in Arizona. We're about to start something for a client in Nevada. And we're looking.
Have you looked at working for the federal government?
We do that about every year. And so far, the decision, the decision for the next, as part of our planning process, like, okay, what do we want to do new this year? And we've done it kind of ad hoc in the past, but for about the last 3 years now, we've still not formal, but we've been a little more structured about it and said, okay, so what do we want to do? And what do you think? What do you think about trying to get on GSA and breaking into the Beltway? Like, oh man, there's just so much overhead, and there's so many restrictions, and I think to get into the federal space, you almost have to hire somebody that's been doing it for 20 years, that lives in the Beltway or in Virginia, has the Rolodex. It's just a beast unto itself, and it's just a little bit bigger bite than I think we're ready to take right now.
You actually brought up something I hadn't thought of. Has the government at all looked at using, I mean, as a small business, everything I use is cloud-based. Has the government actually considered using the cloud more and more? Are you seeing that at all, or?
Yes. So the government is a general statement. I want to be careful with it, but as a general statement, the government is going to be a late adopter of anything.
Right.
There's just there's a general conservatism, cautious approach with anything that is risk. Again, it's a political world. You can debate it, but you have to consider just the adage that it's safer to do nothing than to do something and risk doing something wrong. And the other thing with government is there's just a lot of concerns about security.
Right.
If it isn't sitting on a box on my floor that I can look at, I don't know where it is, and it's probably not secure. Right? Wrong? Only time will tell. But I know here in California, the Department of Technology is doing a lot with a couple levels of cloud. There's a Cal Cloud, which is an internal cloud, so it's only for state agency. Right. It's run by the data center, and I'm aware of at least a couple situations where data is being hosted on Amazon, on AWS.
Wow.
So it's beginning.
Yeah, I think one of our last guests actually mentioned that when you work for the government, you just don't want to. There's really almost not an incentive to be innovative.
It's safer to do nothing.
You don't want to be. You don't want to do something that gets shown on the news.
Screw up.
Or there was that. What was it? The debacle with. Was it Anderson? Or was it Accenture where they had spent billions and got nothing out of it? So.
Which debacle?
Which one?
No. I'm trying to think. Accenture's actually come fairly clean. I think.
Maybe there were a couple. Deloitte.
There could have been Deloitte. I think the Administrative Office of the Courts project.
Sorry, guys.
Was challenged, and then there's been an issue with statewide payroll, I believe.
Right. But really,
four issues.
Your clients aren't really. They're just sort of maintaining. You don't really see a push to try to be more innovative.
Our basic client base is I won't say they're not trying to be innovative. They're trying to innovate and improve, but they're not on the bleeding edge of technology.
It's more like incremental.
Yeah, they're trying to get from a 1990s architecture to a 2005 to 10 architecture, but they're not chomping at the bit to get out in the cloud and do that kind of thing, right? There's a lot of risk in that right now. 5-10 years from now, I'm sure they'll get there. They're going to let, you know, folks that are more comfortable taking risks, take those risks and shake them out for a while.
And by then it would be like in spaceships or something.
Yeah, yeah.
At this point, actually, I want to open it up to questions from the audience. If you, and actually, I'm sorry, go ahead. How do you want to handle this, Kate? Want to pass her the mic?
I have a loud voice.
It has to be picked up for TV land.
You're on TV.
Hi, TV. Hi, I'm Emily. And when I first heard that you were working with government contracting, my ears really perked up. My company works with selling to law enforcement, state, local, and federal. And it's definitely difficult, and we've experienced that just in what we've done so far. So I have kind of like I have two questions. I have a broader question and then more specific. So I'm curious, since you came from the corporate world, what's the biggest kind of skill or thing you learned there that you took with you to the startup world? And then the second question, you talked a lot about the ways that your journey has been with government contracting. So I guess if I was to ask a question about that, and I have so many questions, but if I was to ask one, it might be kind of where would you recommend that startups like us start if we're looking for that? Would it be, RFPs or just calling up people, or what do you think is the most kind of effective route to begin with? So those are my two questions. Sorry.
So we're gonna have to. No, hold on to that. We're gonna have to make this a little more. Give her the mic back. We're gonna have to make this a little more interactive because my memory's not that good. I'm getting old. So I think the first part of the question I think I got, which was from the private sector to the government. So I'm going to kind of twist the answer here a little bit. I'm still in the private sector. I run a privately held company, LCS, right? I ran a business unit at Oracle. My clients, my target market was and it continues to be government clients. Right, so I haven't really done a transition other than going from, running a business unit within a humongous Fortune 100 company to running our own little business. So that's the only real transition. Our target clients, our target market has remained the same. So there's not really a transition there. Does that make sense? Does it answer your question? Okay. And then just bring the second part back to me again.
Yeah, so just kind of where to start, because I guess the problem that we specifically have encountered is we have software, and we've kind of done a grassroots thing where a lot of members within, local, state, and federal law enforcement actually use the software. But when we've tried to go top down, a lot of times we found that the decision makers don't really understand the impact as well as the users do, but they're the ones who make the decisions. So how to make that connect.
So within the law enforcement space, and we've done quite a bit of work in that space. I call it paramilitary. So it's not as hardcore command and control as military, but you still have a paramilitary mentality, right? There is command and control, that things are very siloed, information is shared on a need-to-know basis, not in a social media sense of put it out there and share it with everybody and let them do great things with it. It's just counterculture to that environment. So you have to understand that. So without knowing a little bit more about your offering, it's hard to be specific.
Well, maybe I can bug you later.
Yeah, no, we can take this offline.
Perfect.
And get me afterwards. I'll give you a card and we can go grab a cup of coffee someday or whatever. But again, I would say this. Think about who within your target account would go, wow, and start with them. They may not be able to write the check, but if you can get them going, wow, they can work it up the channel that you can't navigate. This is when I talk about good old-fashioned selling. You get somebody to go wow, that will get it to the person who needs to know and get you to that person.
So get your Sherpa.
Exactly.
Or your champion.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Is that
Thank
fair?
you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
So in the entrepreneur land, in startup land, we get pep talks all the time, like whatever you believe in, go for it, rah, 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 you know, and throw risk to the wind. And even if you have no money, just go. I wish you'd been here last night. We had a couple of guys that were just like, we had no money and we decided to book all of these artists that we couldn't pay. And and that bothers me. What is a good resource for entrepreneurs to get the other side, like you're describing, your strategy and your risk assessment, and how do you be smart about this and not get caught up in the, oh, believe in yourself and just go do it even if it doesn't make sense and no one believes in you. You know, where can startups go that don't come from that business background to get that balance in their vision?
I'm not sure I've got a great answer as far as specific names of resources, but there are a lot of books. Again, I'm dating myself. I'm not saying YouTube sites, but I mean, again, they're just the traditional books that, you know, walk you through that kind of process. What, you know, selling is selling. The channels, the mechanisms, whether you're doing it through social media versus sending out flyers. I mean, so the channel can change, but you've got to identify, you know, folks that are interested in what you're pitching, you know, get your value prop in front of them, get them excited, figure out what their process is to close the deal. I mean, it doesn't matter, again, what the media for that is. It's just business 101, right? Selling 101. So again, a cheap way to do it is just the classic books. There's one called Strategic Selling. It's probably a 20-year-old book, but each time I look at it, I learn something new, right? And just that kind of stuff. The other part of it is, I'll tell you, we've since 2005 when we founded LCS, we've since started 4 other entities. One of them's a nonprofit, and we went through the government red tape of getting 501c3 status, and we've got 3 others. And each one, we go through the process, and there's one that may or may not work out, which is okay. But we know what the odds are. We figure it out. You get it. You know, and then the other thing is get your advisors in place. You'll spend some money, so you've got to have some money to work with, but you need a financial person, not just, there's the tax aspect, but it may be more than just a CF or a CPA. You need somebody that's got kind of a CFO perspective, which is looking at the big picture and you know, unit cost times volume, you know, plus overhead, and can kind of do some pro forma financials for you. You need a legal advisor, somebody that's going to keep you out of legal trouble, get contracts documented, get your formation done properly.
I know some good lawyers too, by the way.
Yeah, here's a pitch for you guys, right? But you know, if it's IP, you need to get trademarking and that kind of stuff done. So it's out there. The idea of let's just go book bands for, you know, to sell concerts that we can't pay for. Now, I mean, I just plain wouldn't do that. It's almost an ethical question more than a business question. That's just not the way we roll.
And I just want to point out that both Steve and Stefan really make a good team. You know, Steve is sort of the sales business, and Stefan is sort of the technology. And I think part of it is forming your team with certain strengths in certain fields.
Yeah, for example, this is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I feel pretty confident selling something that whatever I sell, he'll figure out a way to build it, right? Now, so,
yeah,
and again, we yeah, sure, we can do that. And then it's like, you can do this, right, dude? Yeah. So it's tongue-in-cheek. We really do collaborate more before we go to that point, but it kind of to draw the picture of, yeah. So that was a great point, Rich, is there's the advisors, but then there's also your team. You can't have 5 marketing people start a business and expect it to be successful. You need a marketing person, you need a financial person, you need an operations person, whatever it is. You need representation from all the key disciplines, right?
Is there any other questions?
No.
I'm just curious, was there ever a point where you started to feel less like a startup and more like an established business? And if you have felt that transition happen, do you attribute that to any particular point in time?
That's a good question.
It's a really good question. So, yes and no. Like all good questions, I've got a great answer. And the reason I say that is, I just mentioned we've started a series of businesses now, right? So LCS is actually beginning to feel, when I say established, I'm not feeling overconfident or overly successful, but it's starting to feel established. We've got some infrastructure in place. We've got a little bit of an org chart with a little hierarchy, and you know, it's starting to feel like it can run without me there every day, right? My mission in life is to make myself irrelevant to LCS. That's the only way I can get out, right? And so that creates opportunity for others, right? So there's a succession plan and that stuff in place. And part of the challenge is getting the right people in place and empowering them. Part of the challenge is me letting go. So to that extent, yes, it's starting to feel like that. But we've got a couple of other ventures that, I mean, we've got one that we're investing in developing a product right now, and I'm negotiating a deal, working on negotiating a deal with our first customer, and the product's about ready, and we're, you know, so no, I mean, it's like nervous time every day. And it's one of those where LCS has some capital to invest and has invested in this, but this is a startup unto its own, and we've got to get it self-sufficient. So we're just not letting ourselves get complacent, because, okay, so let's get this one to where it's kind of starting to roll, but let's go do something else too.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Are there any other questions? Well, Steve, I wanted to thank you.
Certainly, my pleasure.
For taking the time to educate and inspire us. And this is actually this is carved by an Air Force veteran that's local.
Oh, very cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you for being our guest here.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure.